Hello everyone, welcome back again. So last time I showed you some tips and tricks about painting, and as promised today I'm gonna be painting with brushes, and as I told you before, cheap brushes, we tend to go through these very quickly because they're very cheap. They're not the expensive kind of brush, so I don't need to take that much care of them because one, they're super simple, super cheap, and two, they're not gonna last long because of the materials they're using. So it's already fraying the tip, but that's fine. It's a cheap enough material, just bend it a bit, and that's all you need to do. Then once it gets moist, everything will be working just as intended. So let me set up my brush washing station here on the side. As I told you before, I use 3 stages of water, so this is the cleanest one. I'm gonna put some clean water on the brush so it ends up a bit more moist. When it's moist, the tips gather much more easily. So let me see if this zooms in. There we go. So as you can see, the points are more gathered after moisturizing, and that's the same with paint. So when you're painting, just give it a little bit of moisture. Don't let it be too moist so there's a lot of water. Just dry it out a bit. A lot of people recommend doing it in your mouth. Should be moist enough. Just a small streak of water, and that's all you need. As you see, when I pass the brush, it leaves a bit of water. Okay, so that's it for brush preparation and for my rinsing station. Today I'm gonna be opening this pack, Trick or Trade. I got this for Halloween, and we made a poster just for the kids in the neighborhood to come and grab some packs so they can take them home instead of candy, which I think it's cooler and healthier than eating candy. So let's see what we get here. And again, you don't need to use this. You can use any material. Oh, Pikachu and Graveyard. Gastly. I like Gastly a lot. So what can we do here? Let's see. We have the Pikachu. We have the Gastly here. I'm leaning towards the Gastly, mostly because I really like it a lot. So let's see. Over here, I'm gonna put it over here. What I end up doing more often than not is I use a bit of tape. This is some painter's tape for miniature painting. This is just to cover up some edges you don't want to paint, but that's not the case here. I'm gonna just tie it to this frame, the same I painted last time. It's just so it's in place. So as I mentioned before, when you do this, if you're painting and you go over, if you turn the card would go over the paint and it would make the back of the card painted. And we don't want that. We just want to avoid like damaging parts we don't want to damage. So if you tape it here and you twist this, the paint is going to be in the same spot if you're trying to go to the edges. So here what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna speed up the video for a second. I'm just gathering my paints, picking the materials, checking the colors, and here I just start with a basic shape, just a circle, so I can know where I'm gonna start painting. I check my brushes, check everything I need. This takes a couple of minutes, but you can do it pretty quickly. Here I started gathering all the paints I thought I would need. If I need more paints, I would get them or find them nearby, but usually what I do is I end up mixing the colors I need, so it's not necessary just to get a specific type of paint if I know I can make it. And to know what colors to make and how to make them, internet, just check color blending, and here we go back again to the video. Just painting a circle where we want the figure to go. Then we make up the clouds surrounding the Gastly, so we know the relative position of some clouds. There we go. So now you're blocking some of the image and you know where stuff is gonna go. Let me add a second layer. I'm gonna dry it out on the side. I have the fan over here. It's summer, it's hot, but because I don't wanna burn myself, I am really affected by heat, so I need to have the AC on when possible. So see, we add a second layer on top, a very thin layer. This one was already thinned down. Remember I mentioned that these ones I mixed with a medium, so they're more liquidy from the get-go, and the wet palette is making the paint a bit thinner by itself, so I don't need to add water back to it. Not at this stage. For others, I definitely will. And also here what I'm doing, it's mostly blocking off the image from the background. Slowly but surely the image on the background is disappearing. And once we have covered it enough, I think 2-3 layers, usually 2 layers is enough just to make a drawing on top. Just a rough sketch, you don't need it to be perfect. And when you're doing this, you know where to paint, and then the rest of the paint is gonna be blocking the rest of the image. So with this second and third layers, this one is mostly dry now. Gonna be adding, now it's lacking a bit of moisture, so I'm gonna wet the tip of the brush, gather some water, mix it here on the tip, and thin down just what I need. I don't want to thin down the whole thing, just what I need from the blob. So if you can see, I'm using a glove now. It's very useful, so you can brush it off your hand and see if it's too wet, too dry. This one is too wet, so I'm gonna put it here to absorb some of the moisture, remove some of the paint, and now it's painting more evenly and not so wet. And here we block off the image. Now it's mostly blocked, and that's what we need. One thing you need to be careful about, it happened to me here because I was rushing a bit, is that when you're using a brush that is too moist or you use too much force on top of this, you can smudge the paint that's beneath, and you don't want that. What you want to do is just let it dry. A lot of people, when they're painting and they want to paint fast, a lot of miniature artists as well, what they tend to do is they use a hair dryer, just a regular hair dryer, to make the paint go dry faster. So here I cleaned the brush, and now that I have cleaned this, what I'll do is take some thin point brush, I'll moisturize it, I'll moisturize the tip of the brush, and I'll mix it with this black. Now this black I haven't mixed, so it's very thick. So what I do is I take a blob of this dark brown, put it to the side, and I start looking at it, how thick it ends up being. For now, it's still too thick, so I'm gonna be adding a bit more of water. And there you can see that it's slowly starting to thin down. One of the benefits of putting this to the side and doing separately is that if you mess this up, for example, you water it down too much. In this case, I think I watered it down too much. You go back and add some more from the pile. So now you end up with a better color. As you can see, I'm not a pro. I'm gonna try to see if this works just fine. The tips are splitting, so this brush, not too high quality. So you can see the tip is splitting. I don't know if you can see the tip. Let me see. So here, the tip is gonna be thicker than you want it to be. So what happens is that instead of being a point, in some places it ends up being flatter, and that makes it a bit more difficult. to paint fine lines, so you need to be careful on how you do it. If you paint upwards, you're gonna be able to get finer lines. So here you have a fine line with more pigmentation than before. And again, it's just how you brush, so if you make it a thick stroke and you press it harder, you're gonna get a thicker line. In this case, I want thin lines, so I'm gonna moisturize this a bit more. This is a bit thick now. It's a lot of playing with the paint, getting used to it, seeing how it reacts and how it behaves. If that's good enough for you, if you want it thicker, if you want it thinner. In this case, I want to go thinner because it's just for some line work. Just gonna set the line work here. Just a circle. Nothing too fancy. This is just to know where things are. And again, if I don't like it, I can start over. It's got a bit dry now. Gonna add some more paint to it. So one of the things with low quality brushes is that they don't absorb that much moisture, and it can make it tricky just to know how much is too much, how much is too little. In this case, I'm getting very little paint from this brush. It's not dripping as well, but push, move on. We don't make that the end of our journey here. We just adjust, adapt, and keep painting, keep having fun. Going slowly in this case helps a lot. You can go over the details later. But I think that's pretty much the gist of it. That's what I would want from the painting. So now what I do is I'll clean this brush. It's wet, I'm gonna dry it out, pat it dry. Because I'm using 3 stages, it's pretty much as clean as I want it to be. The brush is not perfect, but I can work with it. Now, moving on to setting up some color. So I know I want some white, so I'm gonna thin down the white paint. Gonna put a lot of water there, thin down the white paint. Painting with whites first is, or clearer colors, is really important, mostly because it's very difficult to paint on top of darker colors. So if you want something white, you better start off with white. If you want something to be darker, then you start with a darker color. But if you start with the dark color and then put something white on top, it's gonna get you a couple of pass-throughs just to get where you want it to be. It's not gonna be instant. Slow and steady. Here, adding more white. Again, trying to be as gentle as possible. I'm getting thicker lines here. Should have thinned it down a bit more, but we're having fun. It's not for a professional like play. Here you can see that if it's too thick, the paint, what you end up getting is the brush strokes. The brush strokes make it thicker and have volume. Usually you don't want to have volume with this. Also because if you're going to be playing and you're going to feel it, that's not something you would like. I'm going to clean the white. Clean it, clean brush, pat it dry. Okay, now I'm going to go for the red. red. Again, it was the same concept as before. It was thinned down previously, so it's very liquidy. I don't need to mix it with water. This red is much better mixed from the get-go. Different materials, different colors, different pigmentation. So some materials are better, some acrylic paints help you paint better from the get-go, just because of how many pigments they have in the material itself. Now I'm painting over here. Just really simple. Going for the simple details, nothing too fancy. And again, this is the first layer. Just try to keep it simple. Don't overdo it. Don't try to make it too complex. Now I'm gonna go with a lighter purple. I have two purples here, one lighter, one darker. And I'm gonna use the lighter purple just to go all over it. Just all over the sides here. Just to get a base color out there. This will make it so that it looks more like a cloud in the end. I'm gonna use the darker one then to make the highlights of the clouds, because Gastly is a ghost and it's purple clouds surround him. Here I'm using very thin paints just to get what I want out there. First layer of colors, it's just an idea, and you keep building on top of that. You don't get a perfect result as soon as you start painting. My wife usually gets angry when she sees me painting, because at first I begin and it's like, oh, it's awful. It looks hideous. I remember once we were painting, we had a sort of competition. We were painting and she said, oh, I'm gonna win, yours doesn't look that great, ha 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 ha, mine is better at least. And she was making a lot of it, because usually I tend to win in painting and arts, and hers was definitely better than mine at that stage. Actually, hers had a lot of color and it looked fantastic, but mine was a blob, a big mess, pretty much like this one. It looked nothing like it. Actually, it was even worse than this one. But that was just for the base colors. It wasn't for what the final result I was aiming for. So when I started adding more colors, more layers, she started getting angrier, because like, that's not fair. Yours didn't start that well. But well, it happens. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some of the black paint, put it here, and I want it to be purplish. Sort of, not very purple, just a tiny bit. This is too thick, so I'm gonna add some water. You end up playing with the colors. You end up checking if that's what you want. Sometimes light doesn't help you that much, but you do what you can with what you have. Try to have a good lighting wherever you're painting. Natural light is totally fine. Actually, it's better to have natural light, but not everyone can sit in front of a window to paint, so it's fine if you don't. Now this is a really dark purple. I like it, but I want it to be even darker. So I'm gonna make another blob on top of here. Get some more water, mix it here, and start blending them in. Because I want something that's almost black, but has some of that purple tones to it. So this is not the black we were using before, it's more purplish now. And it's not light like this one. So you have two colors here. Hope you can see them, let me see. So here what I'm doing is I added more black to make it more purple. So it's not dark as this black, but it's more towards the purple side. This one I'm gonna use for the shades alongside this one. So that's mixing colors. You don't need to have the colors. Just know Some colors make them darker. Having a color palette helps. Here you go, thin, and just start applying it. Has an off purplish color. It's not purely purple, it's just a tiny detail. Some of the things you can get by mixing colors, which is not perfect by any sense of the word, but it's something. Again, as I mentioned, it's the first layer. So you just start adding some color there so it looks more like what you're painting. Now it's looking more like a Gastly. It's looking more like the end result we were looking for. I'm gonna add a bit more paint on this side because it was too light. So you can see I'm sort of smudging it all over. That's fine. This is the first layer. Once it dries out, it's gonna be much better, smoother. The more thin layers you add, the more color you're adhering to the paint. But be sure that the layers are thin enough, not too thick to leave brush strokes, unless you want to. If you want to leave brush strokes and you want to make it 3D effect, go for it. In this case, I don't want that because it's too much for what I'm painting. So now I'm gonna go with darker black just to see where the eyes are gonna be. I think this is a good spot for the eyes. Okay, I am back after a short break. So I let the paint dry. I'm gonna come back to it. As you can see, the wet palette, the colors are starting to smudge, mostly because of the moisture in the wet palette. So they are shifting over to the top, to the bottom, to the sides, but the main colors we have are still there, and we know the references we're using, so we can keep using the same wet palette. Something I did forget to mention before the break is, if you put too much paint, like this was a lot of paint, this was a lot of paint, vertically, when I put the lid on, the paint stuck to the lid. What you want to do is cover it, but be sure that these are not tall enough to be touching the lid, because otherwise your lid will get painted. And the other thing is try covering it in between breaks so that it doesn't dry up in the upper side. Like here, it's still moist. So it's not as if we are losing a lot of paint or getting paint that has become dry. When that happens, you end up with clumps in your painting, and you don't want to do that. Also, it affects your brush ability to paint more evenly and thinly. So just remember, try to not let your paint dry up. It's okay to stop painting from now and then. You don't need to do everything in one go, just like I did now. You can let things sit, you can let them dry. You can use different techniques to let them dry. One of them is the classic, leave them for a couple of minutes, come back later. That's the most common way you're gonna let this dry, because you don't have to do anything for it, just take a break. It's fine to take breaks every now and then in everything we're doing. It's important for us to take breaks, just because, like anything in life, if you're overwhelmed, if you're trying to just push through everything and don't give time for yourself to rest, you're not helping yourself, you're actually hurting yourself in the process. Sometimes it might seem you're not, but on the long run, you usually are, and it's harmful for you. It doesn't help you at all. It doesn't help you move forward faster. It just makes it so that you get tired faster. So if you don't rest, you get tired faster, and it takes even more time to recover from that. So give yourself a break. It's okay to feel like you're not doing much. It's common, it happens. but it's also important to be gentle with yourselves, take care of your health, and hopefully that also helps you enjoy the process a bit more. So here I was mixing the colors again, just so it was the same shade of color. When you have colors that are sitting there for a while, they start separating. I showed you in one of my videos that paints that are sitting for a while usually start separating between different pigments that have different density, and that makes the color change basically. Because you have pigments that are interacting differently, you need to mix them up again so that they are the color you started with. That's it if you're having a break. Usually if you paint in one go, it will not happen fast enough. It takes a while. All the paints I've been using, they tend to separate if they're more liquidy, and the wet palette makes it faster just because it's not drying out in the process. But still, try to mix them every now and then. And it's fine if you don't get the result you were expecting at first. If you say like, oh, I wanted this to be darker, I want to add more details here and there, go ahead, do it. Go for it. It's fine. You don't need to be so judgmental about yourself or what you're doing. It's okay to go back and do some things again. Don't feel guilty about it. Don't put too much pressure on yourselves. Now here I'm going through the second layer of colors. I don't know if I'm gonna add more layers afterwards, but we'll see. We'll see. Here I'm popping out the white where I want it to go, just to give it the highlight I want. Also, as I mentioned in one of my first videos, is when you're working with stuff that has line work, for example here on the end I will use most likely a pen, not a brush, because it gives me more control and a more even line work than using a brush. Also because I don't have the skill yet to do line work with a brush, and I don't have brushes that are good enough for me to keep a constant line. Like this brush, it's not very reliable, but gets the job done. Just what I needed. We don't need to make it perfect, just need to get the job done, make it do what you want it to do, and that's it. Okay, there we go with the eyes, the teeth. It's missing the red. Let's go with the red another layer. I think the mouth is good already. Gonna mix up the color here a bit. I think I'm gonna add some color here to make it pop a bit more. With some colors, if you're painting in between black, if they're too thin, for example this red is very thin because of the medium I used before, you'll need to apply a couple of layers. One other thing you need to be mindful of when painting. Here I am painting against the table. If I lean it forward, what could end up happening is I could end up with the paint rolling over if it's too liquidy. Like the red is too liquidy, so if I tilted it, it could be just like a droplet of water. So it could become a problem down the road. So just be mindful of that. If you're painting against a flat surface like I am, it's easier for many details. Otherwise, what you can do is just be mindful that too much liquid will make it move. Like if I tilt this, some of the paints are gonna start rolling over, like colors here are starting to move, and that's the same effect here, the purple. So that's what happens when you have a lot of paint that it's more liquid than less thick and more liquid. Here I'm trying to make this shade a bit darker, not too much, just a little bit darker. With the wet palette, you don't have to end up with a work of art in your wet palette. It needs to be what it needs to be, so you're gonna end up mixing stuff. This is something you're using to keep your colors, blend your colors. If you want to keep it neatly, just buy one of those preschool palettes for the basic paints and have them with the little bolts and everything separated. That's fine as well. Paint will dry faster, but you'll keep the colors separated. Here I like to blend colors, and it helps me to pick the right color for what I'm painting. So what I'm gonna end up doing now is I'm gonna end up like here drawing some line work to make it more cloudy. So here I have the borders. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect, just needs to be something you're happy with. I'm trying to make the edges pop up a bit more with this. Sometimes you want to add larger details, sometimes smaller. Sometimes you don't want to add the details because you don't want to take from what you're seeing, so you leave it as is. You can keep adding. If you don't like it, you can remove some, you can add some. Here I'm trying to add more detail. I'm drawing up, so I'm gonna put more paint on the brush. Because this is the first stroke I'm doing with this. It doesn't need to be perfect. I can go back and do it again later. You have big circles, small circles. You notice the paint drying up here, and that's fine. When you have paint that is drying up, you're gonna get a different color, and that's normal. That's how paint dries. It dries differently from what it's in liquid state, so usually what you want to do is just paint a bit on somewhere on a surface similar to what you're getting, and you'll know the final color. In this case, you can tell that the color is changing in some areas as it's drying up, and that's fine for now. We don't care about much about that because we're gonna paint over it again later. Same with everything. You can do multiple layers, you can make corrections. Sometimes when you're painting and you thin it enough, you use it as a forgiving canvas, so you can paint up however you like later. It's just testing the ground to see what works, what doesn't. I'm gonna make this one a bit thicker for a final layer of the dark purple color. So I'm adding more paint that's less diluted, and I'm gonna get a much darker, actually I need it much darker. Mostly because I don't want it to be black, I want it to be a purplish black. So just a little bit of purple here. Mostly a very dark color. It's very similar to what I'm gonna be using for the clouds later on. This final color is helping me just get a better outline for the final touch. Here I'm gonna run into some problems, for example, where this is still fresh paint because I'm painting everything together. Usually what you can do, and this is one good tip, well, don't have someone mowing the grass near you. That's to begin with. I think they're going away. Sorry for that. Hopefully it doesn't bother you that much. Okay. Here we go. I'm gonna keep painting here. Hopefully the noise is not too unbearable. Hopefully they go away faster. It's kind of stressful to be painting with that background noise. Let's set the colors here. I'm wearing headphones. I think I'm gonna have to mute myself for a while so it's not that annoying. I'm gonna try to be coming back every now and then once they're not mowing afterwards, but it's okay for now. Okay, back recording again. Hopefully this time they're not gonna be mowing the grass right outside the window. It's neighborhood and they hire them to come every week to mow the grass. Just renting here, so I have no say about when and how they do it. I would prefer natural flowers over grass, natural wildlife, regional flowers that use less water. That is in many cases better for the environment. In many senses, you have flora and fauna that you want to maintain on certain areas, and you don't want to obstruct that. You don't want to change everything when you go to a place. As human beings, we tend to be very invasive. So I like it when people have gardens that are made with natural flowers, where bees can pollinate. It's nice. I really like it. Now let's move out to the other purple. Needs to be darker. As you can see, the purple from before is fading a little bit, so I'll go back again. Doesn't need to be perfect. Actually, imperfection in this case is better, because clouds are not perfect. They have weird shapes. You don't know how they'll be behaving, and that's what we're looking for. Let's move this here, another one, another loop, loop-de-loop, loop-de-loop there. Color some more paint. It's a bit dry, so I'm gonna add a bit more of butter to make it a bit more runny. It's easier to add the finer details that way. In this case, for this kind of art, I would have preferred to use the pencils, just because it's more straightforward. I can add less finer details, but because I'm not trying to focus on the finer details with the brush, it would have been good enough with the pens, the brush pens would have been fine. Here a couple of twirls. Let's add some more detail, finer details here now that we're using a brush. Wouldn't want to, but I'm already using it, so. Here we have another loop, another loop. Doesn't need to be symmetrical. Gastly is covered by a cloud of gas, not always the same shape or the same colors. So now I'm seeing where do I want to add more details. Maybe here, a couple of weird lines, some loops in other places, just like gas moving around freely. I'm gonna make it here, the other direction. These finer details make it more pleasant for me, just because I know I'm adding my own touch. It's not gonna be replicated. If I'm copying something, I add my style, and my style could be, I want to add a couple of extra lines. I want to make it more squiggly or whatever, you know. You don't need to be very detailed about many things. Okay, now we have this, and I'm gonna do a final pass with the white and the black, mostly because the white is thin and it's not very noticeable. So I'm gonna go over with the white paint, make it a bit thicker, and go one last time to cover all this, make it more even. There we go. And we're removing some details we added before, but those were there for reference. They don't need to be right now as we want them to be in the end. Okay. What you can do when you're painting here, you can add some shades, you can make it darker in some places, lighter in other places, like to give it volume. So for example, if I add some white here and I start mixing it with the gray from the base, just to play around, just to show you something else. You can also add some depth of color when you're mixing. It's a bit too light, then let me get some more gray. So we got some gray here. That's the drop of the eyes, just to give it a bit more volume. Same with the mouth, for example. If you are gonna add some more depth to it, a darker red just here on top. It gives it another layer of volume, even slightly. This is gonna dry up differently, but these changes help it pop up more in many different ways. For example, here I'm gonna be adding some black here, so that color separating this. Here, the back of the teeth also has some darker colors. Still mixed with the red, but that's fine. Just a bit of contrast. Clean my brush. I'm gonna add some highlights. For highlights, you can do the opposite. So here I have a really dark color, dark purple. What I'm gonna end up doing is I'm gonna end up having lighter color, not as dark. So it's the reverse. So I'm not adding shade to the top, I'm adding light to the top, just to give it more volume. And you can see like light is coming from the top, covering some areas from one side. Here there's a lot of theory on how you add light. to different objects. You're making it as if the light is coming slightly from the top. Hopefully you can see it in camera. And this is a lighter color. Okay. Some light here. And then the final touch is just a really dark purple. Let's blend the paints. And you go to the opposite end with a really dark color here, which is the shade. Not necessarily black, really dark. Just to highlight the contrast. So really dark, really light. It's a sphere, so it's all over the place. And we should let it dry for a while before we move on to the next step. Let me add some more details, finer details. I'll grab my brush here, a bit more of white here on the eyes, because I think it's still needing to flatten out the white. It's still too thick, so it was not light enough in some areas. You have time. You can do it over. You want crisper lines, and go over it again. Okay. Now let me add some more detail to the brows. So here I have the red. I'm gonna be painting red here. Just the highlights. Don't wanna make it too thick. Just thin enough. I already made the work of thinning out the paints. Maybe one couple of lines here. This is a cartoon, so it doesn't need to be perfect. What you can do later, I'll show you right now in a sec. Well, not right now. In a second, after it dries up, is how to add additional details. Oh, also, forgot to mention, if for any reason, for example, you add too much paint to something, like in this case I did it to the red, what you can do is take a brush that is dry. Just gonna dry this a bit with a paper towel. So now the brush is mostly dry. I just put it in here to absorb some of the moisture from the paint. What that does is that it reduces the volume, and it also helps to control the drying speed. So there, I removed some of that paint. Put it in front of the fan. You can always do this with other materials. In this case, it's fine. I'm gonna add some more clouds here. Gonna make some clouds appear from the back, like it's hugging him a bit. It's not like he's on top of everything. So here you can add some more shades. Add more volume to the clouds, just give it some other colors. Everything adds at this point. Try not to overdo it, but adding volume, shades helps your pieces get a different feeling. Doesn't need to be anything perfect. Here I'm just scribbling with some darker colors, just moving the brush around, adding some volume here and there. Slight changes make a huge difference when you're in person. Maybe not that noticeable if I'm here doing it, but always helps just to practice or try new things. Don't need to be perfect on your first go. So here I'm gonna add more color here just to make it darker here on the bottom, smudge it over. I think that's it, and I'm gonna let it definitely dry for the line work. Okay, so now this is mostly dry, so I can start just with a fine liner. I use these ones just because I like them. I got used to using them, but you can use whatever fine liner you have, or you can use the brush. This is actually a brush. This is a brush tip. So usually I would use a 0.5 or 0.5 or 0.1 to make the line work, but I don't have one of those. They're really dry. And the others I have are very thin, and I wanted something thicker for this art. So right now what I usually do is just, because this is a cartoon, I just start going over the edges. I don't use a brush, mostly because here I can be sure that paint is flowing more easily. With a brush, you need to check it out first. So here there's a huge difference between non-painted line and a painted one. So you can start noticing that when you're painting with these markers, this is the final step, basically. This step helps you define every detail you had been painting before, every smudge in the corner. This helps you cover many mistakes. That's the beauty of it also. Don't have to be perfect. With a line thick enough, you can cover a lot of imperfections and make it look better in a second. So here I'm gonna be correcting the shape of the eye a bit, giving it a different curve. Here what I do is also I start here with the line. I skip it because the cloud here is covering it. Come over here to this side. gives it some volume to have these lines covering Gastly. Here again, same concept, just skip here because the cloud is covering it. This line is not perfectly circular. I think here it could be going straighter up. So that's what I mean. I think enough line can help you a lot. Now for the mouth, we'll go over the details. Start covering some of your mistakes along the way. Makes the art pop up more. Adding this line work, I really like it because it makes the details you were working on pop up even more. It's the contrast that happens between the coloring before and after. So you end up being able to highlight the details you wanted to highlight. Here's the same. I'm gonna be making the lines on the bottom edges, just like there was some kind of shadow over there. And finally we have final touch, the eyes, which should be more elongated. So it's like that, more elongated. And I think that's pretty much it. So again, try to cover that up and you can call it a day. You can say, oh, it's done. Is it how you wanted it to be? That shouldn't be the question. The question should be, did you have fun doing it? Did you enjoy it? Because this is about hobbies. This is not about work. If you want to improve, go ahead, do it. But the most important part is having fun, enjoying, and taking care of yourself along the way. So hopefully you had fun. Thank you all for watching. Remember to subscribe, comment if you have ideas, questions, or if you want me to do something specific, let me know. I'm glad to read all the messages. And thanks again.